So this is my presentation on the Enlightenment. So what was the Enlightenment? Well, the Enlightenment is generally defined as the period during the late 17th and 18th centuries in which Europeans applied new scientific ideas to human life. Enlightened thinkers, also known as philosophers, analyzed politics, morals, economy. They embraced reason and toleration. There was also increased interest in education and knowledge. The Enlightenment was influenced by a few different things. For starters, increased print culture helped get philosophers' ideas to a wider range of people. The Newtonian worldview also increased interest in reason. France's government was in need of reform as well, which caused philosophers to think of different reforms. And a big influence was John Locke with his ideas of natural rights. So, philosophers were the enlightened thinkers. These thinkers advocated for religious reform, reason, toleration, improvement of society, economy, and government. They inspired reform and revolution. They thrived in print culture, which gave them a wide reach, but it was mostly limited to the urban classes. So it's important to remember that philosophers didn't reject all religion. Some believed religion and reason should be used together, which resulted in deism. Deism is the belief in a sort of natural religion. It wasn't seen as miraculous as previous religions had been. Most philosophers disagreed with the intolerance and bigotry in many churches. Religious toleration was limited in that it didn't usually apply to Judaism or Islam. Free speech was another idea of the Enlightenment, as well as education. Torture and the death penalty were also seen as anti-Enlightenment. As I mentioned before, John Locke's idea of natural rights and even direct democracy was sometimes seen in the Enlightenment. So, some notable figures. Voltaire wrote his treatise on tolerance, promoting religious toleration. He was also free speech and free religion. Rousseau wrote The Social Contract, in which he described how modern society corrupted humanity. He also saw society as more important than the individual, which was something different than the general enlightened view. Diderot was an editor for the encyclopedia, which was incredibly important for education. He also saw European empires as immoral. Beccaria wrote Crimes and Punishment, in which he denounced torture and the death penalty. He also thought people had the right to a speedy trial. And Montesquieu wrote The Spirit of Laws, and he thought that monarchs' power should be limited and there should be a separation of power. So women in the Enlightenment. Women were often excluded, despite there being much talk about equality. Salons were places often run by women where people could discuss new ideas and also promoted philosophers. Women tended to be seen in a household or family setting. In Rousseau's Emile, he argues that women should be educated with the purpose of pleasing men. There are some people who advocated for women in this period. Mary Wollstonecraft published The Vindication of the Rights of Women and heavily criticized the ideas of Rousseau and Emile. Montesquieu also thought that women were not naturally inferior to men, and if educated, they would have equal potential. Although he thought there should be relative equality for men and women, he also believed in traditional family, so he wasn't 100% for it. Cosmopolitanism was the idea that everyone should be treated the same aside from culture. Cultural relevantism and increased interest in foreign media were ways in which foreign culture was embraced during the Enlightenment. Some notable people in cosmopolitanism were Immanuel Kant, who, when talking about the European expansion, said they were countries belonging to no one since they counted the inhabitants as nothing. Diderot also criticized expansion and argued that Europeans had no real right to take the land. Herder believed in cultural relevantism, which is the idea that all cultures should be valued. He once said, "The culture of man is not the culture of the European." So, enlightened absolutists were monarchs who followed ideals of the Enlightenment to gain political power. They sometimes consulted philosophers. One of these absolutists was Catherine the Great, who wanted to abolish serfdom but decided against it as to not upset landlords. She did create various educational reforms, though. Another was Frederick the Great. He was religiously tolerant and also abolished torture. The final absolutist was Joseph II. He favored toleration and education. All of these enlightened absolutists became less enlightened later due to fear of and need to repress various rebellions. So here's a general timeline of the Enlightenment. On this end, on the beginning end, there's Isaac Newton publishes Principia Mathematica in 1687. And then in 1689, John Locke's two treatises on government. In 1748, Montesquieu published Spirit of Laws. In 1751, Diderot published the first volume of the Encyclopedia. In 1762, Catherine the Great dethroned Peter III and took control of Russia. In 1776, Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations. And in 1792, Wollstonecraft published The Vindication of the Rights of Women. The beginning of the Enlightenment was fueled by reason and reform brought from the scientific revolution. Economic, social, and government reforms were taking place all over. The logical improvement was the focus for the majority of the period. As more rebellions rose across Europe, progress was seen less positive and more dangerous. More conservative ideals were adopted towards the end of the 18th century. And here are the sources. So, yeah, that's the end. Thank you.